count my blessings.
Well, it's the first time I've been interviewed, so
Ready whenever you are.
that I can recall anyway.
Okay. Well, let's see. According to following here this policy and procedure here,
All right.
we will begin, and I'll say that my name is Kim Hobbs, and this is September the 7th, 2007, and we will begin. What is your name, sir?
My name is Richard Charles Kellogg.
Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Baraboo, Wisconsin,
Okay.
1920,
All righty.
October 12th. You know what they call people? You know, people that live in Michigan and are Floridians, and people that live in Florida are Floridians. People that come from Baraboo are Baraboobians.
Was you born in the hospital or in your house?
In a house by a, what do they call them?
Nursemaid or whatever?
Yeah, I guess so. I was born in a house in Baraboo, yes.
Okay. All right. What squadron were you in?
It was in the 514th.
Okay. What was life like in the United States during the Great Depression?
Well, it was pretty tough.
Were you from an affluent family? Did you have a steady job, a steady income?
My father ran a bowling alley, a pool hall, and he had a barber shop connected with it, and he invested with his relatives, and after he got out of World War I, and he invested in this pool hall, bowling alley, and barber shop, and soda fountain combined. And in about 1932, we lost it. They went broke, and he went out of there with 94 cents in his pocket, I guess. And he went to work for in 1932 for a tavern owner, and he eventually bought the tavern himself. It was outside the city, and he kept it till 1978. But we struggled, or he struggled. My parents struggled through the 1940s or 30s and 40s.
So did you help around the tavern? Was that
Yes,
your
sir.
job? You had chores?
I was tending bar before I was of legal age. I used to clean place up before I went to school and before I went back to high school in the morning.
So how does, when the people talk about how hard they have things today, what do you think about their complaining when you hear about what you went through during the Depression?
Well, I sympathize with them, but we had some pretty hard times. We ate bologna most of the time, and what was the other? I forgot the other meal that my mother prepared about every week.
So did the hardships that you had from the Depression, was the war that great a shock, or did you think you'd already gone through some hard times?
No, I didn't. We lived a normal life. I had a happy childhood, went through high school, and I played football on the high school team, and we beat our chief rival the first time they were beaten in 25 years in the town. We were the kings of the high school football team. Had a great experience with that. And it was in Janesville, Wisconsin.
Well, what level of education did you reach before you joined the Army? You completed high school.
I completed high school and went 1 year to Beloit College.
Okay.
And I went in the service.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Yeah, I just got done tending bar for my father when I heard him over the radio when I was driving home about noon, I guess it was.
Why did you join the Army Air Force, and when did you join
I
it?
didn't join the Army Air Force. I was an eager beaver, and a friend of mine, we wanted to get in and wanted to get in the Naval Air Force or Naval Air Corps. We went down to Chicago to Great Lakes, and we both passed the mental exam, and he passed the physical, and I didn't pass the physical. They said my heart was beating too fast, and I could come back anytime and have it checked, but I was kind of disappointed. I was an eager beaver. My friend got in, and I didn't, but I went home to saw my personal doctor and asked him if he could give me something to slow my heart down or whatever. And I went back down to Great Lakes and had him tested again, but I either took the pill too early or too late, but it was still beating too fast, and they told me that I could come back anytime, but by that time I was kind of discouraged, and I hung around for another month, and I was drafted.
Okay. So when did you first try to enlist?
That was in the spring of '42,
Okay.
and I think I was drafted, as I recall, in probably June or July
Of 42.
'42.
Okay.
Went down to Camp Lee, Virginia, or went to Fort Sheridan for the.
Boot camp?
No, that was the introduction or induction or whatever. Then I went to boot camp at Camp Lee, Virginia. Went through boot camp, and they trained me to be right there at the Camp Lee to be a clerk, a company clerk, I guess. And I hung around there, but I also tried to. By that time, I wanted to get into still wanted to be a pilot or get into the Air Corps, and I tried to sign up for the Air Corps, but they told me I had to wait till I reached my permanent station. Well, Camp Lee was not my permanent station, so they shipped us up to Seattle, Washington, Fort Lawton. I went up there, and I tried again there, and reached my permanent station. That was about September, well, no, it was maybe November of '42. And that was a port of embarkation, and I went up to Alaska, to the Aleutian Islands. I was up in Dutch Harbor, which was my permanent station. I got up there about November of '42 and tried to and take the test for the Army Air Corps, aviation cadets, I guess they call it. And I passed the physical. But I didn't get to go back to the States until the middle of 1943. And I came back to the States. They gave me a 30-day furlough, and from there I reported out to Santa Ana, went through pre-flight, and qualified to be a pilot. But at that time, they had an overabundance of pilots. Didn't have any place to send them, so they sent me back to another furlough. And when I came back to Santa Ana, there was about 900 of us that were qualified to be pilots, and we also qualified to be navigators. And they got us all in a big room and told us that they couldn't, they had to reclassify us as navigators. They had enough pilots. And some of these fellows I was with had been overseas the same as I had. They were from Australia and crew chiefs and this sort of thing. And they were pretty put out that they couldn't go to pilot school. And I remember that they said, well, you go navigation school, you can come out and be an officer and a gentleman. And nobody dropped out that I know of. You had the choice of dropping out. But from there, I went on to Cedar City, Utah, the college training detachment. And they gave you about a semester of college training. And eventually, I ended up and went to Hondo, Texas, and I became a navigator, became a gentleman, came out of first lieutenant. So that's how I got on the Air Corps, I guess.
Okay. So you said you at Santa Ana, was that the base that you went to in Santa Ana? That was in California, or
Yeah,
what?
California. Yeah.
Okay. All righty. So by the time that you completed your training for navigator, you were a first lieutenant?
First lieutenant.
Okay. What rank were you when you finally?
No, second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant.
Excuse me, second lieutenant.
Okay.
I got promoted to be first lieutenant in, I guess when I got this daily, I guess that's when I got promoted.
So in
But some of the navigators came out as flight officers, if I remember. I don't know why I was a lieutenant, but and some of the bombardiers were flight officers, which is one level below a second lieutenant, I guess, or was.
But you came out second lieutenant,
Yes.
went overseas and got promoted to first lieutenant?
Yes.
What rank were you at the end of your combat missions?
First lieutenant.
Okay. All right, let's see. What was your specialty in the military? I think we've covered that.
Well, now wait a minute now.
Okay.
You didn't tell me. When I went up to Dutch Harbor, I was in the Quartermaster Corps.
Okay.
And I drove I volunteered, let's put it this way.
Okay.
I trained me to be a clerk, a clerical job. When he got up there, we got in this Quartermaster Corps, and they got a bunch of us out there and said, I think they asked me, could you drive a truck? Are any of you truck drivers? Well, I had driven a truck when I was in high school delivering groceries. So I stepped out, I volunteered. and that's when I drove what do they call it, 6x6, I guess. And we lived up on the side of the hill in Dutch Harbor, and I had a crew of, they weren't mine, they just rode in the back end of my truck. And we used to unload food and from the ships that came into Dutch Harbor, and we took it out to the warehouses and where we distributed the food to the different units that were up in Dutch Harbor. There was mostly, there were CBs up there, and the ones that shoot the big guns.
The artillery?
Artillery up there. There was artillery companies, but we were just a quartermaster, and we supplied, took care of getting the food and whatever else they needed. I drove the truck.
So
I drove that damn. It took me, as I said, it took me from November of '42 until August of '43. I was involved with the Quartermaster Corps, and I took the test for the Air Corps, and finally they sent me back to the States. So I was friendly with the Aleuts up there. I remember The crew that I had, they would go unload the boats that were docked, and they'd drop these boards down there, and the fellas would put the food, canned goods, or whatever it might be on the board and pull it up and put it in my truck, and I'd take it to the warehouse and get unloaded there. But sometimes beer came in. You had to bring the guys out on the board because they broke into the beer cases that were stacked around in the hold of the ship of drinking beer while they were out loading it. The beer went to I guess it went to there was a little town up there on Alaska where they had a bar, and this guy would, every time you get a shipment of beer in, which was maybe once a month, why he'd open up his place and everybody'd line up for a block away to come and you'd come in there and get 3 beers, I guess, and go out and drink it as fast as you could, and then get back in line and hope you get 3 more.
You probably could have helped him run that place.
Yeah. But it was kind of interesting. But never got too cold up there. The weather was it was either raining or sleeting or snowing, but I don't think it ever got to 0 all the time I was there. But it was just miserable weather most of the time.
Well, now we're getting back to flying.
Okay.
It says, what were the strengths and the weaknesses of a B-24? Did you ever get into the makeup of the plane?
Not really. I had a couple experiences that I will never forget. That we trained after we got our crew together. We went to March Field and we trained in
March Field was where?
March Field, Riverside, California.
Okay.
And I guess we were there 2 or 3, couple months anyway, 3 months. We flew 6 days and got the 7th day off. We took navigation training or navigation flights and gunnery flights, and pilots did their thing, and then the bombardier did his thing, and my first trip on a B-24, first ride, was a night flight. And my whole crew was there, and it was a navigation flight, and it was a navigation instructor along. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time I'd ever been in a B-24. And we took off back in the waist, and the navigator spot was up in the nose behind the gun turret. And when we got up in the air, I crawled up there and got up there, and I had a microphone, these microphones that are on your neck, and you put on the earphones, and this instructor is yelling in my ear all the time, "All right, Kellogg, where are we?" And I guess we'd been in the air maybe 5 minutes or so, and I get up there, and I said, "There's a lot of lights down there." And he said, "Well, you're right over in the middle of Los Angeles." So I didn't know where we were, but I oriented myself, and we were supposed to take a trip up to the Oregon, California line up there, and Mount Shasta is up there. Well, I gave the pilot a heading, which was my job, to get up to, I don't know, we were going to Portland or someplace up there. But anyway, we're going along, and I'm sitting back. Well, I got things under control. And the instructor gets on the microphone. He says, "What about that mountain up there? If I'd have stayed on the same course at the same altitude, we'd run right into that." Well, I was quite embarrassed, and I got to thinking that my crew probably thought, "What kind of a guy we got here? He could have run us into a mountain." But I overcome that. I took the same instructor came along with me on a later flight, and we went down to over the Baja Peninsula down there, and I brought him back on what they call what did they call it? Landfall, I guess. And I hit a good ETA and came in where I was supposed to, and I redeemed myself, I guess, in the eyes of I thought my crew was we sure got a lemon here. But we turned out all right.
Did you feel like this training prepared you for real combat missions, or did you do your real learning overseas?
Well, I guess in one way it did, in one way it didn't. You know, I was in the bombardier, and the navigators would take over if something happened to the gunner, the nose gunner, or any other ones. Well, we'd take their place. Well, the bombardier went to gunnery school. I never went to gunnery school. I knew how to shoot the gun or pull the triggers and all this kind of stuff, because that's what we learned at March Field. But if that thing ever jammed, I don't know what to do with it. And I felt that, I don't know why they didn't send me to gunnery school, to tell you the truth. But I didn't go. But I got along all right, so. But I guess I learned everything there was to learn about it. Well, I'll tell you one other experience we had at March Field was a night flight. I used to sit back in the waist, and we always, the bombardier sat back there. Well, this one, I used to go down the runway, and I'd look out and I'd see the shock absorber kind of stretch out on the wheel, and we're just about ready to get airborne. And here's a big bang. And we blew a tire. Well, the pilot, he could have taken off, or he could have shut her down. He chose to shut it down. And we skidded down the runway, and he had both feet on the brakes, and the fire was shooting out there from that tire that blew, and we got down to a stop and did kind of a ground loop down there and off into the side of the runway, and we looked out, and here you look up after we jumped out right away and looked up the runway, and here's a fire, burning rubber all the way up the runway, and we just hightailed it away from that plane. Our engineer, I guess, stayed and put the fire out on the wheel. There was only about a half a wheel left after we landed and skidded. But we didn't think much of it. They came out and got us and put us in a truck and took us back, and we got another airplane and took off again.
Were there many accidents like yours during training?
I don't recall any. That's the only one. The bombardier doesn't even remember it. I was talking to him the other day. But I remember it.
Well, did you ever compare notes with your counterpart on a B-17? How did flying in a B-24 compare with a 17?
I never had any opportunity for that.
Well, what was your first combat mission like?
Well, that was I didn't get over to Italy, to San Pancrazio. We got over there about in January of 45. And we were a replacement crew. And, the war was beginning to wind down. My first flight was in February of 45. But the 376 had I guess it was their procedure that the pilot, new crew, the pilot of the new crew had to fly co-pilot with an experienced crew. And our pilot, Fred Stangl, did fly, but they got shot down. They landed over in Yugoslavia. And we heard that they got down safely, but it took them about, I guess, 3-4 weeks to get back, and hell, they sent him to the Isle of Capri, and he got rehabilitated. Here we're the replacement crew, and we flew, oh God, we must have flown 17 or 18 missions with different pilots. That they didn't have a crew for one reason or other, and I was I flew with a couple of crews a couple times that I didn't know anybody, and we got along well. We didn't get along all right, but we made it all right. But when the funny part of it was, or odd part of it was, when Stangl came back, he was our pilot. He hadn't flown in, he just flown in one mission, and here we're an experienced crew who had flown, I don't know, 16, 17 missions before he took over. So we had an experienced crew with a rookie pilot. But that was the beginning, I guess, of, we had a couple of experiences, and this was one of the pilots that we flew with was named Pitts, and he had ditched several planes, I guess. I forgot what his name. They had a name for him because he ditched so many planes, but he was still flying. We flew with him, and he did a good job for us. The one other experience I remember, we had flak, and we never had any fighter attacks or anything, but we did do one thing. We dropped the bombs through the bomb bay doors one time, and I'll never forget that. Those doors were out there flapping, and the engineer, he got some wire someplace and wired them shut, but not many people dropped the bombs without opening the door. Well, we tripped a switch, I guess, and salve them. They all went out together.
Well, what was your easiest, your milk run, if you had one?
Well, there were milk runs, but I don't remember any particular one. We flew all our missions I flew the first mission in mid-February, I guess, and the last one was mid-April. Mm-hmm. And I flew 20 missions. Mm-hmm. And we were going up quite a bit and went to several targets. Went to Vienna a couple times. That was a lot of flak there, and there was another. Wiener Neustadt was another target that was below Vienna, but we went to Brenner Pass, which was a pretty tough target. A lot of flak there. In fact, I thought we blew out of the formation or some damn thing. That I remember looking down and. I didn't know if the other plane flew under us or we flew out and flew over a plane, but that plane, I looked down through the window there, and I could look at the rivets on that plane. We were so close. And that was at the Brenner Pass. That was a pretty tough target, but I don't remember. There were some targets that we went to that. I don't remember that were uneventful, I guess.
But your greatest fear, your problem at that point was flak more than the German fighters?
Yes. We had P-38s that escort us, and I think we had the Tuskegee Airmen escort us, but we never had any fighter attacks. We had on a couple occasions, we saw a B-17 off in a distance a couple times, and maybe it was a B-24, and one time we were going along and saw this plane out there, and then we got near the target, and I guess we started getting flak, and it was pretty bad, and we just thought that was the enemy, and passing our altitude and speed and so forth down to the guys running the flak guns, but I don't know whether it's true or not,
But the possibility of a captured plane.
yeah, that they put it in flying condition, and that was a thought, but I don't know if it's true or not. But we never had any fighter attack. Flak was the biggest concern, and we got hit a few times. I mean, we ran into. There were holes in the ship and the wing, but not bad enough to. Well, we feathered a couple engines at different times, but I thought the B-24 was a good plane. It always brought us back, so.
Were you ever wounded?
No.
Did you ever have a close call where you saw one of the holes just right above your head?
No, I can't say that I did, no. I know we got out when we landed and looked over the plane, and there were some holes in the wings and that weren't there when we took off. But as I say, the thing was winding down. Probably the last couple of missions were milk runs, I guess.
You came back a couple of times with an engine feathered. Was there ever a mission where you weren't sure that you was going to make it back, whether you were going to have to shut down early?
No, but being a navigator, I was supposed to, if we did feather an engine, that we came back by ourselves a couple times, and it was up to me to make sure when we crossed the coast that we crossed where there was no reported flak. I'd go between the. I had a map there that showed where the flak was heaviest and on the coast, and also I was supposed to be alert to if we had to go into another base, that I would know where to go. But we always got back to the home base. Okay. But we did come back by ourselves. We didn't come a couple times. We didn't.
It is said that there are no atheists in the foxholes. To what degree did your experience in the military and in combat affect your religious faith?
I can't say that there was any. It didn't affect my religion. I never gave it much of a thought, to tell you the truth.
Did you
my religion picked up when I got married, I guess. My wife, she's a good Catholic, and I kind of follow her. We go to church all the time. But I can tell you a little experience with my wife. I knew her before I joined the Army, but when I was, we were still, when we got married, was after I came back from Italy, and Paulette was our best man. But she comes from a small town in Wisconsin, Lake Geneva, down the street or down the road here, and she tells that you give up sacrifices for Lent, and she decided that during the war that she'd give up dates for Lent. And she was a telephone operator, and the other operator said, well, Elsie, you got to give up something to sacrifice. And she said, well, just think what a sacrifice it would be if I got a date. She always tells that story, so.
Did your reasons for first joining the military, drafted, patriotism, adventure, or et cetera, change over time during the war?
No, I would say I was a eager beaver all the time, but some of these things happened and you never gave it a thought, but I'm sure if they happened today, I'd sure think about it. But, I never had a fear of going on a mission. And we thought that, if we got hit, well, we'd survive. I can't remember being concerned. I was concerned, I guess, but when to fight the battle, get it over with.
Did you receive any medals?
Yeah, I got nothing. I got the normal air medal with a couple of Oakley clusters, I guess. I didn't get any distinguished flying crosses or anything like that, but I get the normal medals. And I had a little more medals than some people because I'd been in Alaska for a year, and which most of the fellows that I had hadn't been out of the States. I was able to get out sooner than the average crew member that I was with, because I had service overseas, and you get points towards. I guess I had 85 points, or you had to have 85 points, and I could get 85 points a lot faster than some people. There were some things that were. I got some battle stars. Mm-hmm. You get a battle star for flying over Italy, I guess, or flying over enemy territory. I think I got one battle star that had a beginning. How did that go now? The beginning, the date was before I got there, and I think it ended before I got there too. But I still got a battle star for it. It's on my record somewhere or other, but things weren't always correct and accurate in the Army or the Air Corps or whatever.
Were you close with? Did you have any buddies on your crew, or was your crew pretty close?
Yeah, pretty close. As I said, the pilot was the best man at our wedding, and we corresponded quite a bit. I became lost for a while because the rest of the crew came to the 376 reunion, and they were always looking for me. This was I can't remember what year that was, but the first reunion I went to was in Charleston. And Dick Miller, the engineer, was the guy that found me where I was. And I never even knew there was a 376 reunion or organization.
It had been in 1996.
Oh, it was before that, wasn't it? Or was it? Yeah, it was before that. I can't remember the year, but whenever we were in Charleston, just before that's when they found me, because that was the first reunion we went to.
Did you have any nicknames for your buddies?
Any nickname?
Any that you could repeat?
Yeah, we called the pilot Stinky, I guess. Name was Stangle, but they called me the Knob. I had a bump up here that I always told them that was my knowledge bumps, but the engineer always called me the Knob. I don't remember any other nicknames, but except they had one for me.
Would you call your pilot your best friend on the crew?
Yeah, the pilot and the bombardier. The co-pilot was, there's still 8 of us still alive, and the co-pilot was kind of a standoffish guy, and I don't know whether he was a good flyer or not. Somebody said he couldn't fly a kite, but
Did you ever have one memory that you go out, remember drinking with the pilot or the bombardier, or something that you,
Well, we always went out to we were very friendly with the pilot and the bombardier, and myself were very friendly with the radio operator. He lived when we were in March Field, he lived in Santa Ana. I guess that's where he lived. And he had some places to go, and that every seventh day we took off, we went with him, and he guided us around that area, Long Beach, and I think we used to go to Long Beach, as I recall. But, we had some girlfriends around us. And one, what was her name? Betty Breitendijk, I guess. She was from Minnesota someplace. But I don't know whatever happened to her, but we, every 7 days, the pilot, bombardier, navigator, and radio operator kind of went out together.
do you remember about your squadron commander or the group commander while you were over there?
Not really, never really got acquainted. We weren't there that long. I remember I was assigned to censor letters, and I forgot all about that, but I had to read enlisted men's letters, not necessarily our crew, but you go and sit in the orderly room or whatever and read the damn letters.
What were you censoring? Just what information did they want you to censor?
I really don't know. I guess if there was any thing that would be useful to the enemy, I guess. But that was one of the assignments I had.
Well, what was discipline like in your base over there?
What was that?
Was it discipline? Was it pretty easy going at your base in Italy?
Yeah.
Tight regulations are pretty much what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, when we weren't flying, we had pretty free to do whatever we wanted to do.
Okay. What'd you do for entertainment?
Well, we went to Lecce a couple times and went to Bari a couple times, but I don't recall anything that unusual about it there. We had to build our own tent. We lived in a tent and no place to take a shower. We had to go down to the 512th, I guess it was, and take a shower down there. And we didn't have very good facilities when we were there.
Did you have entertainment like a baseball field, or didn't do that?
We weren't there long enough.
Okay.
I don't recall any entertainment or any recreation. We were there to get the damn job done, I guess.
What kind of equipment did you work with? Can you describe your flight suits and what equipment you used in a
Yeah,
mission?
we had electric suits and had electric kind of felt shoes. That we put the boots on over them, and had electric mittens or gloves. Hard to write with all that stuff on, and when you're up in the nose up there, when trying to write down the logs, and the crew is telling you what they're seeing, what they see out there is bunch of P-51s or 338s out there and tell me what they see on the ground, and I was supposed to write all that down, where we were when we saw it. And kept pretty busy, but it's all part of the game, I guess.
Oh, did you ride home very often?
Oh yeah, I wrote to mostly my parents, and like my mother saved all my letters when I got a big box full of them. that we're moving into a retirement community and we're downsizing. I haven't thrown those letters away, but I'm about to, I guess. I don't know who would be interested in other than me, so.
I don't know, you might give them to us, we'll censor them for you.
Well, I could follow. I could kind of follow my career through the service if I read all the letters. I've been looking at them.
Let's see, where were you at when you heard about the victory in Europe in May of '45? When that the war was over in Europe?
Well, I think I was back in the state. When was it that date?
May of '45?
Okay, I was back in the States because I found out that the 376 was breaking up the day, I think it was the day that Roosevelt died, April 14th, long in there. And they came through with the fellows who had 18 or more missions would come back to the States and train in B-29s to go to the Pacific. Fellows who had maybe 20 missions or 20, they would stay in Italy, go up and join another group in Italy and finish out their tour. But the 376 was broken up. And I was in the pilot, and I think were the only two that came back to the States right after that. The rest of the crew, I think I had most of the missions in because I'd flown with other crews. The pilot came back because I guess he had been, shot down or whatever. And I think we came back together on the boat, and the other fellows went up and joined other units. But I came back. Well, maybe the bombardier came back too. I can't remember. But I was supposed to come back and train in B-29s to go to the Pacific. But I got to leave and went home and got married. And they were going to have me report down to Miami Beach, Florida, get rehabilitated. They gave me another leave while I was home after I got married, another 30 days or some damn thing, because things were winding down. And I finally went down there, my wife and I, her new wife, and we lived right on the Collins Avenue, I guess it was, in Miami Beach. Walked in the front of the hotel and out the back door, you were on the beach.
Did you come back and consider yourself a hero because of your service in World War II?
Not really. No. I was, as I told you, I was an eager beaver, but I went in, but I was, when the thing was winding down, I was ready to get out. And in fact, my wife would have thought we ought to stay in. I was scheduled to go to Texas, I guess, and I must have had a choice that I could get out or stay in and go to Texas. And she wanted to go. She'd never been out of the state of Wisconsin, I guess. And so she would have liked to stay in, I guess. But
when did you get out?
August of 45.
Did you take the GI Bill or go on to college or what?
No, I went. I'm sorry that I didn't. I went to work for General Motors at the town I was in. It was my goal to go to work for General Motors. the guys that work for him, they got a company car, and I was kind of a car bug, and I went to work for him. I didn't get a company. I went to work try to get in the sales department, but they had an opening in the financial department, the accounting department, and they made an accountant out of me. So took me a while before I got a car, I'll tell you.
Well, if we could pick your brain back in the navigator school, what does it mean to measure drift?
Well, you have a drift meter, and you used to look down, and the wind, your plane was drifting. You could tell because the wind would cause you to get off your course, I guess. You had to, if the wind is coming over here, you got to head into the wind kind of to stay on the same course, I guess.
What did it mean to navigate by dead reckoning?
Well, dead reckoning was with you draw it out on a map. Your course. You're going to go from here to here, and you use your instruments to tell what your compass and your airspeed, and take radio fixes, and that's dead reckoning. Get from one place to the other, as I recall.
What means did you prefer? What was the most accurate means of navigation?
Well, probably dead reckoning. The combination of dead reckoning and pilotage, I guess, when you can look out the window and see where you are. And but if you want to get your ETAs right, you've got to know where. You got to use your instruments for that. Take fixes, radio fixes, or I guess we didn't have anything else but radio. Well, I flew Celestial for a couple times, and shoot the stars with Sexton, but I forgot most of that.
Well, if you had one thing that you wanted to pass along to some young fellow that sometime asked you questions, is there?
Well, I'm a firm believer that I think that every young man should spend some time in the military. In fact, it makes a better person out of them, I think. In fact, I don't think it's, I would encourage even some of my grandkids that ought to go, even male or female, make a better person out of them. And I wouldn't hurt them to spend time in the military. That's about all I can say.
All righty. Thank you, sir.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and thank you.